Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, the only podcast for dance studio owners, where each week we bring you business growth strategies to help you increase your profits, impact the lives of more students, while ensuring you get back some time to have a little life outside of the studio. It's time for you to become the go-to studio in your area. Now, here's your host, founder of the Dance Studio Owners Association, Clint Salter.
Hey there, dance studio owners. Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. It's Clint here, and we are here for another week. I'm so excited that you're joining us for today's episode. Now, today it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Sean Souza to the show, who's joining me to talk about how your customers think, and more importantly, how you can use it to your advantage. Sean is the founder of Psychotactics and helps entrepreneurs and business owners simply understand why people buy from them and why they don't. He provides in-depth resources on marketing strategy, customer retention, internet marketing, psychological tactics, and so much more. I can't wait to jump in. Sean and I actually spoke at an event together back in Australia last October, and he's a really fascinating guy. So Sean, great to connect again, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. That was quite a mouthful, reading up all that stuff.
You've done a lot of stuff and you do a lot of stuff, which is great. So why don't we start there, Sean? Tell us, what do you do in your business, Psychotactics, to help your customers better understand their customers?
Well, the main thing that I started out with was a factor of hesitation. I was always surprised that customers would come right to the point where they were ready to buy, and then they would back away. So that's where we started out. We started out with, why do customers hesitate when they're almost at the point of buying? Mm-hmm. And so that's where I started the journey. But over the years, that journey has expanded into other facets, which is what I'm really interested in more than anything else, is not just why customers buy and why they don't, but also how customers will tend to buy a more expensive product instead of a less expensive product, even when they have them side by side. Or, there are so many facets of how you have a product or a service sequenced. What you can say is, I'm very curious, and I'm very curious to help myself first so that I can help others, because it's all about me.
Yeah, totally. So I want to start with the first thing that you said, which you started with, which was, sometimes, customers are buying, they're really interested, they're about to sign for our studio owners the enrollment form, and they say, oh, look, we're not going to bring little Susie back to class, or, we're going to try another activity. I mean, what's going on inside of the head of the mother, basically, of this little child that's just trialed a dance class, but they're not going to kind of fulfill and go through with signing up as an enrollment? What's happening there, and what can we do to, I guess, change that situation to bring them on as a customer?
So if they haven't already signed up, then there are a whole bunch of things that are happening. So what happens is, if you I have this book that is called The Brain Audit, and essentially what it talks about is that there are two parts of any kind of presentation. The first part involves attraction, and the second part involves risk. Now, under the attraction, you have three elements. The first is, what problem exists, then how am I solving that problem, and who am I solving that problem for? So you have the problem, the solution, and the target profile. Now, if you don't clearly state what that problem is, and you just say, we are helping you to dance better, or we are helping, if it's more generic, then it's not going to be of any value to the customer. And how do we know that it's of value to the customer? Because that problem comes from the customer. So the first thing that we have is the problem, the solution, and the target profile. And the target profile is not a target audience. It is, say, Susie, someone that maybe the mother of the child, mm-hmm. and you speak to her and she tells you what specific problem she would like you to solve. And now you have to go out there and find another 1,000 Susies, which is remarkably easy. So the first part is the problem, the solution, and the target profile, which which enables you to attract the customer. But then after that, you have a whole bunch of things, which is risk factors. So you have objections, testimonials, risk reversal, and finally uniqueness. These are what I call the 7 bags of the brain audit. And if you don't take off even one bag, it's like being at the airport and just one bag remains on the conveyor belt or the carousel, and then they don't buy. They have to think about it.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. Makes complete sense. I love this. I want to unpack a little bit more. So with the attraction phase, you said, problem, how to solve it, and the who, which is the target profile. For our studio owners who already have a studio, and one of the things a lot of studio owners are struggling with now is like, how do I speak to my target market that isn't saying the things that you said that are generic, right? It's fun, make new friends, come and move your body. I mean, everyone's saying the same things. And so what you're saying is, better understand, that target profile, understand, the parent. How do we better understand them? Is it about us going to our current customers and saying, look, like that is our ideal customer. We want more of Mrs. Smith. Let's have a conversation with her to understand more about why she comes here, why she stays. How do we really wrap our brain around that?
So there are a bunch. So the first thing to note here is that it's target profile and not target audience. And this is the biggest mistake that people make. Mm-hmm. Target profile is like, when you want to think of target profile, think of crime. When a crime is committed, the detectives don't say, let's go and find the target audience that committed this crime. Mm. They go after one person. Mm-hmm. And you have to go after one person. Who is that one person? That one person is usually someone who has a very pressing problem and someone who is likely to be able to afford your services. So it can't be someone that's just generically thinking of a problem that might exist way in the future. It needs to be someone that has a problem. It needs to be someone that then wants that problem solved and can afford it. For instance, you took, say, I'm going slightly off tangent, but you look at Airbnb, for instance. So yeah. Airbnb, they had this problem that they thought they were solving, and they were not solving any problem. In fact, they were going downhill. What caused them to become the billion-dollar company that they are today? It was one guy. It was a drummer from, I forget, some guy's drummer, some rock star's drummer. And he said, see, the problem I need solved is I want the entire apartment. I don't want to share the room with someone else. I don't want to have breakfast. I want the entire apartment. So they got the insight by speaking to one potential customer who was willing to pay for whatever their services were. And that changed the business around. Now they sell precisely. I mean, most of the Airbnb, the profit comes from renting out the entire apartment, not some cubby hole in your house. Mm-hmm. So you have to, there are a bunch of target profile questions that I don't have here right now, but sure. Essentially you go through the whole bunch of questions, you ask them, and then, they write the copy for you. They tell you what is the problem. They tell you how to solve the problem. They tell you, these are my objections. Here's how you fix my objections. Here's the testimonial I would give you if you fix that objection. Here's what causes the biggest risk. And you know what? While you're still here, there's this uniqueness that I would like to have from you. So why not do it? And they will give you your entire sales page.
Perfect. And so once we have that information from that target profile, what do we do with it, and how can we best use it? Because I can see this being very beneficial for our studio owners when it comes to writing their copy for their Facebook ads and for their website and any really any promotional material, right?
It depends on the medium. Every medium is completely different. So a Facebook ad would probably have just the problem and maybe a hint of the solution. It's like, struggling to write better headlines at the last minute. Here's how you can do it in under 3 minutes. That's a problem solution. You can't go more than that with a Facebook ad. Mm-hmm. But if you were writing on a sales page, now you have more leeway. You have the ability to bring out the problem, bring out to to agitate the problem. Because what happens is, think of it like this: you're driving down the road on a motorway, on the freeway, on the whatever way, and then you see red and blue flashing lights.
Yeah.
And immediately you slow down, right? So what happens is, when customers or clients read that problem, they slow down and they start paying attention. Now, as soon as that problem goes away, then, you're not paying attention anymore. You start to speed up. And imagine you ran into a sign that said, "No traffic police for the next 300 miles." So what happens is, you have to bring the problem, but then you have to bring up the consequences of that problem before you bring up the solution. And what people tend to do is, more than ever, they don't bring up the problem at all. They just bring up the solution. Like, you will feel more fit, you will feel more happy, but that's not what attracts the brain. The brain is attracted precisely to a problem, and that is because the brain is always looking for problems because it wants to keep us alive. So when it walks down the street, it looks at all the flowers and the women and the men, but what it notices is dog poo. It always notices that, because we've stepped in dog poo before, and it knows that if I step in this, it's going to ruin my day. So it pays attention to the problems more than the solution, which is why great weather every day, that's fine. But the moment we have a hurricane coming along, everyone pays attention.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think the tricky thing for our studio owners is, what they're providing is a very kind of positive, motivating experience. I mean, what comes to mind for you when you think of problems? I mean, for our market, for our studio owners that are listening, the big thing that I've seen with our members that they're using, which is working really well, is getting your kids away from the screen. Like, less screen time has been, like, we've seen some really great campaigns come out of our members around that. But how else do we kind of identify these problems? Because generally, like, going to dance is like someone's seen it on TV and they're like, wow, that looks really cool, I want my kid to go into dancing. They're not necessarily thinking, oh, my kid's anti-social at school, or they're not talking to anyone. Dance might be a good place for them, or are they? I don't know.
They are. It's incredible. I used to be a cartoonist. I wasn't always in marketing. What do you use a cartoonist for? Happy stuff, right?
Yeah.
No, there's always not one, but 100 problems that the art director is trying to solve. There are 100 problems that the person who's hiring you is trying to solve. But the point is that you can never figure it out. If you sit there at your computer and try to figure it out, then you're going to come up with all the soppy stuff that you've been coming up with so far.
Yeah.
You have to speak to the client. You take them out to lunch, and this is why it needs to be a target profile, not a target audience, not a persona, not any of that stuff. You take them out to lunch and ask them. And they will tell you stuff like, what I really like about the dance studio is the quiet that you bring to the, and some of them will want quiet, and some of them will want energy, and now that is a problem. So when you go to a dance so for instance, I used to go to yoga, and I went for a whole year, and I'm very persistent, but I hated it the whole year. So why did I hate it? Well, he didn't know because he never asked. And the reason why I hated it was because it had no structure. He would show up, he would do anything at all. Now, that's a problem. The problem is, are you sick of going to dance studios that seem to have no structure? They just show up, they do whatever they feel like, and then you go away and you think, wait a sec, right? So now I'm talking about my yoga experience. I'm not familiar.
No, I loved it. I love this though. Like that's totally relevant to our audience.
So every one of those people in that yoga studio will have, so for instance, we have a great cafe close by, and my wife won't go to it. And the reason why she won't go to it is because of the toilet. The toilet is filthy, and she figures that if the toilet is filthy, then the baristas must be filthy, and so we won't go to the cafe.
Yeah, wow.
Right? So this is stuff that's going on in people's head that you have no clue about. And what the only way you can ever figure it out is to speak to them and ask them, what is the problem? What caused you to want to come to the studio, for instance, instead of another studio? Or, the thing is that I don't want to jump into the whole bunch of target profile questions here because
Sure.
we'll go off tangent.
Yeah.
But what I want to stress is that it cannot be a target audience. It has to be a crime scene. There has to be one person. And the second thing is that they will tell you exactly what their problem is. And often it might not have so much to do with all of your dancing. It might have something to do with where your studio is located, where the kind of energy you bring, a whole bunch of stuff that you would never have considered until they bring it up.
Yeah. This is gold, Sean. So is that kind of the target profiling kind of exercise and process in your brain audit book?
It's briefly there in the book, but obviously everything has depth. Everything goes.
Of course. But that's going to give people a better kind of a deeper understanding around the process.
Yes, they will get a pretty good understanding, and especially they understand that it's not the solution that gets people's attention. It's always the problem. And when you think a problem, you think, well, I don't want to be negative. But this is not about negative. This is about something else. This is about an issue that they're having, and they want you to solve it. And if you solve it, then they're buying the stuff from you. So that's how you should go.
Totally. Love it. I want to kind of skip. We talked about the attraction part, bits of the attraction part. Let's go to the risk when it's, people are coming up against, objections. Well, her dad doesn't want her to come to dancing, or it's too many nights a week, or we can't afford it. How do we kind of approach this part of essentially the sales process?
So the answer to all the problems or all the objections, first of all, they all lie with the target profile themselves. Mm-hmm. If you get a good target profile, and you usually do, what you can do is ask them what are their objections. And they come up with the objections. And then you tell them, how can we reduce these objections for you? And they tell you how to reduce the objections. So what a lot of people are doing when they write copy or when they try to persuade is they sit in their own brain. And that's not a very great place, not a very good place to be, because the client already has the objections and they have the answer to the objection. And that's why you have to be a good interviewer. Mm-hmm. And when I say good interviewer, I don't mean having great interview skills. I just mean great listening skills, and you have to have a device that's recording everything because you actually want to use their exact words. I was once I was doing this exercise in California, and the person was saying, the problem I have with my employees is that they're very stodgy and they don't function like I want them to. And the person writing it on the board was saying, the problem that I have with the employees is that they are like robots. And you go, wait a second, that's not what he said. She said, yes, that's exactly what he said. That's not what he said. No, that's exactly what he said. So I said, repeat it. And when he repeated it, she said, that's what he's saying. I'm just turning it in. No, you're not turning it, please.
Yeah,
Clients,
that's a really important tip right there is share it as it's shared, directly from the customer, right?
Yeah, and there is a very good reason for that. And that is when we express our problems to another person, we use emotion. When we write it down, we use language. We use our own words. Mm-hmm. But the customer never talks about words. They're always like, my website drives me crazy because I feel like I'm locked in my own house. Some of the rooms are closed and I can't get in. That's how I feel. And you go, oh, do you have access to all the areas of your website? No, that's not what I said.
So this is so powerful, Sean, and I can hear the minds turning over from our studio owners as they're listening to this. I want to not completely switch gears, but I know that you've had a deep career in copywriting as well, and this all kind of ties in quite nicely. But copywriting is something that our studio owners can struggle with. They're great when it comes into, being on the dance floor and creating amazing dance classes and experiences. But when it comes to actually getting out of their head what they want to write, and whether it be a blog post or some web copy, or it's a Facebook ad, or it's a newsletter. What do they need to kind of think about when they go into that copywriting phase?
The first thing is the terminology here. And when you say copywriting, there are really what most people think of is just text, but there are two parts to it. The first is what you'd see in a magazine. So there's editorial and there's advertising. And advertising is your sales page. That's what you see on, say, on the right-hand side of Facebook, or on a sales page or a landing page. That's what we'd call copywriting. Mm-hmm. The other stuff is editorial. These are articles. This is content where you're telling rather than selling. So there has to be a very clear demarcation between the two. So I need to know, first of all, are you talking about the left-hand side of the page, which is the editorial, or the right-hand side, which is the ad? Let's
start with the editorial first.
Okay. So what you have to do with editorial is essentially the thing that people want to know most of all is they're like 5-year-olds, and they want to know what, why, how, when. Essentially, the core of any article, any editorial, is how, what, why. You pick up any newspaper, pick up any book today, and you'll see that's what's happening. They're essentially unpacking the incident. And then they're repackaging it by using stories at the beginning, in the middle, at the end, wherever. So they've got two parts to this. The first part is just, I'm going to tell you, supposing I say, how to write better headlines in 15 minutes. Well, now I can just go here, 1, 2, 3, or I can tell you a bit of a story and lock you into the article. And then I can go, okay, now here's what is the headline? Why is it important? How do we do it? And so then you start to unpack all of that information. So there are two parts to it. One is the storytelling part of it. The second part is the core guts of it, the content that you want to cover.
Good. I love this. All right. When advertising, right? So when we're writing a sales page, let's say we've got summer camps that are coming up and we're selling a bunch of dance workshops. What should we be thinking about then?
Then you have to follow the bags of the brain audit, because they give you the sequence. Find the target profile. So who is coming to this summer camp? What is the problem that they're trying to solve? What are the objections that they have? What are the risk reversal? What's the testimonial? And what is the uniqueness? So the right-hand side strictly follows the brain audit. The left-hand side follows the other method, the other who, what, why, and stories.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. One of the things that you talk about is signature stories. Can you kind of expand a bit on this for me?
So signature stories are really what I was talking to you, which is about the brain audit. The thing is that when you're telling people what you do, it's very difficult for them to remember it. So they remember it through a story. Now, if I were to tell you a story about a person that flew in from Kryptonite and landed in Kansas and whatever, you immediately know that story to be Superman's story. So you know the sequence of that story. Every time I don't have to repeat that story, and it's very easy for you to then repeat it to someone else, for you to tell that story. And that's the core of a signature story. The core of a signature story is that 90% of it should be known to the person who's listening to the story, and 10% is the tweak. So let me give you an example. So when I launched the brain audit in 2002, there were already 10,000 or 100,000 books on marketing. So how do you make it stand out?
Yeah.
Well, you run a signature story. And the signature story goes like this. Imagine you got on a flight, you put 7 red bags on the flight. And then you got off at the other end and you're waiting for your bags. And then the first red bag comes out, you pick it up. The second red bag comes up, you pick it up. The third one comes up, you pick it up. Then you have an orange bag, a purple bag, a green bag. Then the fourth one comes up, you pick it up, fifth, sixth. So when do you leave the airport? And you say, well, I don't leave the airport until I get all the 7 red bags. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what happens in the customer's brain. Unless you pick up all the 7 red bags, they're not going to buy your product or service. So you see that link. First of all, the story was not new to you. 90% of the story already existed in your brain. And that makes the great signature story, that it's something that I've experienced before and you're tweaking it just a little bit. And that explains what is different about your product compared with any other product, or your service compared with any other service.
Great. So powerful. Sean, I know we're running out of time. So I want to, with my last question, what is something that you think is going to be really beneficial for our studio owners to go away and implement from this conversation?
I think that they should find a target profile, find a person who has a specific problem, or maybe a client who just signed up, or and you think is a great client, and have this conversation with them. Read the brain audit and go through the target profile questions, ask them the stuff and record it. And you will find that your business is completely different because you have a perception you never had it before. You had an idea, and you have their words, you have their emotions. That's the most critical thing of all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, powerful. I love it. So, Sean, I think the brain audit, you're going to sell a couple of copies of that. Tell us where we can, how we can grab our copy, and where our studio owners can find out more information about you.
Well, you can find the X out of the brain audit at psychotactics.com/xbrain, like the letter X, brain. The brain audit's also on Amazon, and it's also on our website at psychotactics.com.
Awesome. That's great. Cool, Sean. Well, great to connect again. And I want to thank you for sharing some of your wisdom today with our studio owners. This is going to give them a huge amount to think about. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us today. For all the resource links from the show and to receive access to our free dance studio growth training, make sure you visit transformmydancestudio.com.